So let's start today. Today I'm going to introduce you to a new thing, risk-based approach. Risk-based approach, although the FIU and the central bank wanted this concept introduced way back in 2016, January 2016, and then again they reimposed it in 2018 by the two, the first one, 2016, was a Gazette notification on CDD and then risk-based evaluations. Then you can hear me, right? I'm audible, right?
Yes.
Right, very good, good. So then 2018, by way of direction, rule number 1, or guidelines number 1, they reimposed it. But my knowledge is that very minimal number of institutions are practicing it. And I know for sure that 1 or 2 institutions got penalized for not having implemented such things. So let us go through slowly, because for those of you who are not employed in compliance departments, it may be little new thing. So then I thought I'll walk through very slowly. Did you all see the PowerPoint presentation uploaded?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Risk-based approach. I will go through very slowly so that you would gather more information about it, and then I would like you to implement such things in your organizations so that you can be with the regulators' guidelines, plus you can reap the benefit of this risk-based approach. I must tell you at the outset, these are also recommendations by the FATF, Financial Action Task Force, and coming through Asia Pacific Group on Money Laundering as well. The value of the risk-based approach is manifold. I think I shared with you the 2016 rule number 1 and 2018 rule number 1. Did I share with you? Yes, I did. So if anyone has not received it, please tell me. I will. I think you can download it from the Google Class as well. The value of it is that the KYC, CDD, and EDD data is being recorded. And then on the research assignment also, we found that many of you have found that although those data are recorded, they are not being properly utilized in the day-to-day transactions with the customers. But this is a mechanism to which the risk-based approach, this particular mechanism is a conduit. Those recorded data can be fruitfully utilized in your day-to-day transactions and periodical evaluations of a customer relationship. Basically, the value of it is to your own institution and personally for yourself and the senior management and the board of directors in your particular organizations, are that when you understand the concept and employ the little bit concepts described, you are able to manage your organization's affairs very effectively. Basically, as we discussed some time back, your total customer base, there could be, if you take it 100 customers, about 80% of customers are low risk. And about 15% of customers are medium risk. And about 2 to 3% customers are high risk. And another about 1 to 3% of customers are extremely high risk. So to manage an organization, especially financial organizations, if you concentrate your focus on the extremely high risk category and high risk category, you are done with the job about 80%, because low risk 80% and then medium risk probably another 10-15%. They give you business and at low risk and medium risk. So you may assign or delegate such customers to your relationship managers or the executives who are managing them, and the business will go on unless you want to take a strategic redirection. But however, the high risk customers and extremely high risk customer groups will pose a threat to your organizations by way of financial penalties and various other risks. At the same time, you are burdened with the task of evaluating each of those high risk and extremely high risk customer relationships, whether they give you adequate return for the risk that you undertake on behalf of the financial institution that you manage. So if the risk versus return formula is not in favor of your institution, then it is up to the risk managers, all right, but the compliance also should be worried about it, because at the end of the day, accounting period, end of the month, end of quarter, end of half year, end of year, financial year, compliance is also responsible for the bottom line or the profits that you are recorded or losses that you are taken. So conceptually, high risk gives high return, but is it so in your particular customer groups of extremely high risk and high risk? So this can be numerically judged and assessed and evaluated through the risk-based approach. So this is the value of it. The Government Gazette 1951/13 dated 27th January 2016 is also called Rule Number 1 of 2016 under Section 2 of Financial Transaction Reporting Act Number 6 of 2006. These rules apply to every institution engaging in finance business, right? This Gazette notification says, every financial institution shall identify, assess money laundering and terrorist finance risks in relation to its customers, countries, or geographical areas, products, services, transactions, and delivery channels. That's the rule number 5 or section number 5 of the 2016 Gazette. I'm just repeating that here. So what I would suggest from the outset is to segregate or narrow your risk-based approach on practical terms. In fact, I have designed Excel spreadsheet-based model, which I shared with the previous batch of students last year, the same diploma in compliance I shared with them. And last year's assignment was this one. I wanted them to compile a model for risk-based approach for their own institutions. Sorry. And then come out with the risk number for the institution under the risk-based approach. And this is a good answer for those guys who say that compliance is not a business angle or business. Compliance does not contribute to business. Because numerically you can prove how effectively compliance function, how effectively it can contribute to the business organization when you segregate these stipulations here. In these categories, definitely customers can be one angle or one model, one mathematical model to compute the risk number. Because customers, you have low risk customers, medium risk customers, high risk customers, and extremely high risk customers. And the countries and geographical areas can be conjoined, or along with the customer groups, we can risk evaluate and you can make it one model in effect. But those who have ideas of segregating customers and geographical areas separately, yes, might as well do it. But most of our institutions are locally based, Sri Lankan based, but you can segregate into the provinces if you need so. Eastern province or northern province or southern province, western province, like that. But in the model that I designed on Excel spreadsheet, I have taken customers, countries, and geographical areas in one model, one mathematical model to risk evaluate. Then the next big thing was products. Products that your organizations offer to the clientele. Because products are designed with your strategic intention to serve the customer base, and they are basically your bread and butter. You, with your risk appetite statement and going by your compliance policy and decided by the ALCO, Asset Liability Management Committee, or the Strategic Planning Committee, your margins on each product and the applicability of this product to your clientele is the business of your business units who are entrusted with the marketing and selling or issuing and then managing the products. Managing the products when they are sold, as well as when the customers are attracted to them, and also to evaluate how attractive they are compared to your peer institutions, products offered by your peer institutions. Then, so that is two: customers, countries, and geographical areas, and then products. Two models, two streams of risk evaluation. The third that I have developed in my model is the processes incorporating the services, transactions, and delivery channels. the processes. I named it processes because it involves the each and every service standard, service mechanism, the way that you do the transaction with the customer, and the delivery channel. So all three together, one model I have designed. So therefore, all what is indicated in the rule number 5 of this particular gazette notification is covered to risk evaluate. Firstly, to identify risk and risk assess and evaluate and assign a risk number. I must also tell you that if you use the same scale to risk evaluate, then giving a number, numerical number, to all three models, you are able to manage at the end in amalgamating all three together because they are in one and the same scale. For example, 1 to 10. 1 is the lowest risk, 10 is the highest risk. And then also physically you can segregate 1 to 5 is low risk, 5 to 7 is medium risk, 7 to 9 is high risk, 9 to 10 is extremely high risk, like that. So finally, when you done with the job of issuing a risk number to each and every customer, each and every product, each and every process or service, transaction, delivery channel that you identify with a risk number, starting from 1 to 10, 1 low risk, 10 high, extremely high risk, then you can combine or amalgamate all three models on a given weightage, as decided by you and your management. Finally, you obtain a single risk number for your entire organization. Single risk number. And all these things can be shown to your senior management, ALCO and the board of directors, corporate management on a dashboard. And if any one of them need to drill down and then ask for more detail, they can refer to such things and ask the compliance, give me more details on this customer, give me more details on this product, give me more details on these services. Your risk number is this, and how have you arrived at it, and what are the risk areas. So they can, in a nutshell, on a focused basis, they can ask more details, and they can change course of managing that particular customer, that particular product, that particular process or service or transaction or delivery channel in that manner. When you do that, you are not only focusing on your high risk and extremely high risk customer group, which is probably maximum 5 or 6, 7, 8% of your total customer base, total activity base. That will change when you have various high risk products and various high risk processes. However, you are going to focus mainly on the high risk and extremely high risk factors. So the expectation of the central bank, FIU particularly, and the bank supervision and non-bank supervision is that for you to show them that particular risk number that you obtain through the risk-based approach, through the adaptation of risk-based approach, and where you have identified, measured, and numbered your risk. So what do you think that the regulator would be happy or not when you do that? They'll be really happy. extremely happy because you yourself have identified your risks, and in a risk number, whether it is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 low risk, 6, 7 medium risk, 8, 9 high risk, 9 to 10 extremely high risk. When you show that number, they know that this particular institution is low risk, medium risk, or high risk, or extremely high risk. So that is what they want to find out. And they would use that number. Of course, they would call for the working details. You should be able to share with them. And then they will also be able to focus on the extremely high risk customer groups, extremely high risk products, extremely high risk processes, and help you to manage such high risk groups effectively. What would you imagine when the regulator knows that this particular financial institution is high risk? They would naturally make frequent visits compared to another financial institution which is considered low risk or medium risk. And then they will want you to understand the high risk or extremely high risk that you handle and manage. And thereafter, they would want you to make it a profitable venture, because you must understand the relationship between your regulator and yourself, your institution. They are trying to support you to serve the customer better. If the intermediary financial institutions like finance companies, licensed commercial banks, licensed specialty banks are not there, the regulator has no business, and the regulator is in a big vacuum. Regulator cannot reach the end customer directly. They have to reach the end customer through the intermediaries, banks, finance companies, and so on. So when they do that, they will definitely hold hand with you. The regulator will hold hand with you to serve the customer better. That's what they try to do. So when they really are able to identify the risks that you undertake through the numbers given by you yourself, they will be really happy. They will be extremely happy. They will support you. So to my knowledge, there are only a few, 1 or 2, maximum 3 institutions that practice this risk-based approach effectively. Some of the big banks also do not do it up to now. And those students who represent those big banks, I would suggest when you go back to your offices tomorrow or the next time, maybe after the lockdown, you discuss with your senior management, your compliance, and then see the possibilities of adapting the risk-based approach to your organization. You will make a big contribution to the management, and then the management will like you for that. So please take the cue and then try and implement this in your organizations. The problem is that most modern core banking systems and specialized AML CFT systems do not have this function or risk evaluating each customer, each product, each process. Because in my opinion, when you risk evaluate the customer base, the product base, and the processes that you have implemented to deliver those products to your customer, carry more or less the 100% business activity of your organization. In other words, it is more or less a 360-degree look at the business affairs of your organization on the risk angle. The risk angle. So why it is implemented through compliance? Because compliance is the unit that oversee even the risk measurements and anger mechanisms are properly used in your organization. Compliance, that is how it differ. Compliance differ from an audit, internal audit or external audit. Internal audit or external audit, more or less, is a post-mortem, isn't it? They dwell with the figures already reported, affairs already reported. They may give you forecasts, but still they base on the already reported or historical figures and scenarios. But compliance stress upon the past activities, present activities, and also future activities as well. Because through planning new products, through planning or new processes, new transaction models, new delivery channels, compliance help you to have a 360-degree, whether it's past, present, or future. So that's how the compliance scope is covering the transactions of a financial organization. As far as I know, there is one finance company who using risk-based approach very effectively, maybe two, but I know for sure one company uses it. And amongst the banks, few banks are trying to do it, but I'm not too sure they have really completed it. So therefore, you will see the numbers of using risk-based approach as very minimal. So let's focus on the 2016 rules. Rule number 6 says every financial institution shall document risk assessment and findings. They have to be documented. Consider all risk factors and determine the overall risk and appropriate level and type of mitigation. In this designing stage, you have to choose the parameters. You can use 5 parameters, you can use 10 parameters, you can use 15 parameters if you need to, or even more. But if that number is able to cope with your working capacity, and if the resources can be allocated to that extent. But in my opinion, the medium parameters number would be about 10 to 12. 10 to 12, if the organization large, or 15 can use, but organization can be 8. Yes. Critical value. And on the judgment of the business owner or the head of compliance, you assign the number to each parameter. So for each consideration, if you have these parameters given risk number, then it is easy for you, the Excel spreadsheet or your computer system, to total up and then arrive at the risk number. Update the assessment through periodic review. Have an appropriate mechanisms to provide risk assessment information to supervisory authority. Have an appropriate mechanism to provide risk assessment information to the supervisory authority. Internally from the business heads to the compliance, and then to the executive level committee meetings, and then to board level committee meetings, finally to the regulator. Those are the supervisory authorities. I hope you are with me up to now. If there are any questions, please ask, because this planning stage is very vital. If you are trying to implement it in your organization, understanding this is very, very important. And I would also like to urge or request those students from those companies who are using this at the moment to unmute your mic and then speak up, because I might miss in my explanation one or two angles, or you can have your own comment at this point in time, so that you are helping your colleagues, how many, about 90, 100 of participants, 90 odd participants, to understand this concept better and do justice in their own organizations by implementing and practicing risk-based approach in their organizations. So we come on to rule number 8. Every financial institution shall conduct risk profiling on its customers, considering risk level according to customer category, different types of customers such as resident or non-resident. You know the meaning of resident, non-resident, right? Resident Sri Lankan, non-resident Sri Lankan, meaning basically the residency, particularly for the foreign exchange department activities. This resident, non-resident concept is very important. Then occasional or one-off customers. Occasional customers, one-off customers, or walk-in customers. You know the gravity of handling such customers on the KYC point of view and the CDD point of view or EDD point of view, because those occasional customers can be those extremely high risk categories who are walking on the street to find a victim. I was reading through the news just a couple of days ago that again some foreign nationals, especially Nigerian origin, are emerged in Sri Lankan cities to perpetrate their own scams. And so occasional customers or no customers should be, variation should be of high importance. And legal persons, the opposite word is natural person, individuals. For the legal persons are partnerships, corporates, companies registered under Companies Act number 7 of 2007, and so on and so forth. Then politically exposed persons. I did not explain that again because we discussed a lot the last session and the previous session of PPs. The different types of occupations, different type of occupations. The different type of occupations are also really important to identify the customers, particularly starting with, again, politicians, then even accountants are of high risk, but they can help manipulate the accounts of books of accounts, and to some extent lawyers as well. So therefore, identifying the types of occupations in your client base is also important to identify the risk numbers of your client base. The geographical location of business or country of origin of customers. Again, an important factor. Geographical location, I was mentioning just a while ago, Nigerian citizens famous for conducting scams and then email campaigns and then social media scams. And then in our region, Afghanistan and few other countries who are famous for narcotic drugs. And on the Western Hemisphere, Mexican and other countries who are dominating the narcotic drug trade. So geographical locations of business or country of origin of customers. When it comes to local institutions, in the provincial wise within the island, northern customers, eastern customers, southern customers, western province customers, northwestern province, Sabaragamuwa, Uo province, you can have segregation. Using these points, you can design your parameters. Of course, when you choose a particular vendor to implement the risk-based approach evaluation solutions in your organization, there will be experts who would design those parameters for you. You will have to just give your ideas, your experience, about the details featured client base of your organization. Of course, when you do that, you bind them with a non-disclosure agreement, right? NDA. So therefore, you needn't worry that the software vendor would divulge your internal information to outsiders or unauthorized parties. So therefore, this is the designing stage where you need to focus on these categories of customers and identify the risk that the customers expose your organization, and to help number them with a risk number. These parameters has to be set because they have to be the parameter setting has to be a little, not a little, is a scientific thing, so that you capture the total risk of your client base when you risk your customers. Then when it comes to the products and when it comes to the processes or services and delivery channels, again, you have to do the same thing, and then risk evaluate your products and processes as well. So it can be a different set of parameters for products, different set of parameters for your processes, services, transactions, and delivery channels. Risk control and mitigation measures implemented by financial institutions should be commensurate with the risk level of particular customer identified through risk profiling. risk control and mitigation process, measures implemented by the financial institution should be commensurate with the risk level of particular customer identified through risk profiling. So that is to say that the customers identified and the products identified and the processes identified through the risk profiling number, the control and mitigation aspect should be adequate. Control and mitigation aspect should be adequate. Remember what we discussed about the risk management, identifying the risk, measuring and evaluating the risk, and managing the risk. And if not manageable, de-risking or exiting the risk. Remember we discussed? So those are the principles of risk management. But here, yes.
Excuse me.
Yes, please.
Kindly repeat it again. Identifying
the risk. All right. You identify the risk, whether customer-based risk or product-based risk or the processes-based risk. You identify the risk first. Then you measure the risk. You try to quantify the risk. Identify, measure, and also evaluate the risk, then manage the risk. The measured risk that was identified, you try to manage it. What do you mean by management? Management is that you want to have a return or income more than the risk measured. If the risk measured is 8, you need to have a return of 9 or 10 or something like that, isn't it? Not 6 or 7. Because the risk that you manage, for the risk that you manage, there should be a more return. If not, it's not worth maintaining that relationship on the product or the process. You must. Then the last level is de-risking or eliminating the risk. If the customer risk is unmanageable, the income numbers generated out of the customer is low, where the risk management is high, meaning the manageable risk is the management has to be deciding whether to continue with the risk or not, continue managing the risk or not, and handling high risk without adequate return is pointless. So therefore, the customer relationship can be terminated or palmed off to another institution or discuss with the customer and then come to different agreement. That's a process of de-risking. Right? You got it well? I'll repeat again. Identify risk, measuring risk, evaluating risk, managing risk, and then finally terminating, or you can term that de-risking. If not manageable, de-risking. All right. In fact, in this model, I have suggested to identify the risk is the nominal risk. And then with the mitigating efforts, you bring the risk level down. For example, if I throw an example, electricity power failures. If it is frequent, that's the identified risk. And if an area has more interruptions to the power grid supply, the risk number is high, 7, 8, or 9. But mitigating factor can be installation of a standby power generator. auto failover. As soon as the main grid power fails, automatically the standby power generator is started, supplying the electricity to your ATMs, your computer terminals, and then various other essential services. So that 789 high risk can be lowered by the mitigating factor of implementing a standby generator by about 2 or 3 or 4. So meaning if the originally evaluated risk number is 8, then by standby generator you mitigate the risk by 3, then your risk number becomes 5. So in this example, nominal risk is identified, nominal risk is 8. Mitigating factor is valued at 3. 8 minus 3. 5 is the residual risk. So I employed that concept in the Excel based spreadsheet on that. You're happy with the explanation? Okay. Please ask any more questions if you have. Then rule number 10, every financial institution shall regularly review and update the customer's risk profile based on his level of money laundering and terrorist financial risk. That's a periodic updating. Then financial institutions, money laundering and terrorist financial risk management shall be affiliated and integrated with overall risk management. That's rule number 11. Meaning integrated risk management. Not only money laundering and terrorist financing risks identified and measured and then managed and then employed in that process in isolation, but it has to be on an integrated basis. Say, supposing these money laundering and terrorist financing risks resulting in a loss to the institution, it's a profitability risk. So likewise, credit risk, market risk, operation risk altogether has to be looked at in wholesome basis, integrated basis. Every financial institution shall provide a timely report on money laundering and terrorist financing risk. Every financial institution shall provide timely report to your immediate management and senior management and the corporate management and the board. More frequent reporting has to happen internally, but to external organizations like regulator, central bank and various others, even the auditors, if they need to see, it can be a less frequent, but periodical, definitely very frequent, weekly, monthly, quarterly, updating your senior management is a very prudent affair, very prudent thing. Okay, so from this point onwards, I would start describing my own model, but of course, that model represents all the rules and regulations that required by the 2016 Gazette notification and 2018 guidelines. The total process is named as Risk Assessment Process or RAP. Total process is named as RAP. Then I had divided into 4 other categories. Number 1 is Customer Risk Assessment Process or CRAP. Customer Risk Assessment Process. I explained to you how customers can be risk assessed. I think this aspect most of the institutions do, in fact. Customer risk assessment, they do. Then the product risk assessment or product risk assessment process, each and every product that you offer to the clients, customers has to be risk evaluated. If you want to narrow down to only the money laundering and terrorist financing risk, yes, you can do it. But finally, it is yet less useful. But if you encompass the total operations, including the profitability to the institutions, and the other operational aspects as well, then it is really helpful to manage the organization in a professional manner. So each and every product has to be risk evaluated. I guess you are aware that introducing new products is also a new process. You need to compile, the promoter of a new product has to compile a feasibility report, and then leaving space for the contributions or comments by each and every business head. Finance business head on the financial feasibility, then head of audit of auditing aspects, possibility, and then whether it will contribute, whether they agree with the financial feasibility figures. Then head of risk or chief risk officer has to comment on the risk angle, identified and measured or estimated risks. Then finally, operations. Operations is very important. Every product has to be managed operationally. Operations has to say whether it's feasible or not. If not, they have to bring in various alternatives, and all these heads of departments are able to suggest changes to the suggested ways of managing the new product. And at the end, compliance has to also to comment on the feasibility, whether they are compliant with the existing rules and regulations in the first place, and whether they will be contributing to the desired results of P&L, plus whether they would be complying to the KYC, CDD, EDD stipulations and other directives and Parliament Acts that are in force. So this is how finally, with those comments, the new product is given green light to be implemented. And in the process of implementation, all those heads of department has to be very vigilant whether things are happening in the manner that it was described. So similarly, then comes to processes, functional processes and delivery channels and various other process angles. Basically, as I said before, the products that are designed and in practice, these processes help them to be delivered to the customer effectively. So there can be process. What are the examples for processes? Practical examples, please. Can anyone suggest? Practical examples for processes? No? Practical examples for customers, you can, right? Your savings customer, your individual current account customer, joint customers, then partnerships, companies, corporate customers, and so on and so forth. Products, you do have your particular various types of savings products, various types of fixed deposit products, various types of loan products, personal loans, and then also leasing, credit cards, all are products to lend money, isn't it? Then processes. To start with, account opening is process is a process. Account opening, when account opening application or mandate form is received, the process to the processing aspect of that, and at which point the account will be mandated, allowed or permitted to be operated by the customer, and the manner in which the ATM card or the debit card or credit card will be delivered, and the manner in which the customer is welcome on board, and the KYC process is, KYC recording is completed, and the risk evaluation, CDD measures, EDD measures is completed. So account opening process is one example. Then a different type of product is the letters of credit opening or opening of LCs. Then another different type of process is that check clearing process, clearing of the checks deposited by customers to their account, to the Lanka Clear or whatever, image clearing, storing of image, and so on and so forth. So those are the processes. The important aspect of processes is that it has to be cost effective. That's one of the prime bounded duties of the financial institution, to provide cost effective processes to the customer, because customers cannot be levied with high fees and charges in one way. Second thing is that the cost for your own organization has to be lower. And in the competitive arena of banking and financial services, if you are not competitive with the costing aspect, you are probably throwing yourself out of the window of competition. So therefore, these processes also has to be risk evaluated by a design set of parameters. The risk of this process also has to be measured in numerical form. Similarly, the products also has to be measured by way of contribution to the P&L, meeting the customer demand, and KYC, ability to write the KYC, ability to identify the customer ownership, and various other aspects. The parameters has to be set. So as I said before, if you choose a common parameter, I again take that particular example, 1:10, or you can, even if you can choose to 1:100, or no worries. If we describe the 1:10 parameter, 1 low risk, 10 high risk, identifying about 10 parameters for each of them, you have to dwell with 30 parameters for 3 of them. And each and every parameter has to be numbered numerically: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10, extremely high risk. So like that. And if the parameters bring 10 parameters of this is amalgamated and taken an average or aggregated weighted average of customer risk, then 10 parameters of product risk management numerically taken and aggregated or with a weighted average for one number. Then 10 parameters of processes, 10 parameters of processes risk evaluated with the risk number, and then aggregated or amalgamated with a weighted average to one number. Then you have one number each for customer risk, product risk, and process risk. One number each, risk number. Then finally, overall risk assessment comes handy when if you or your management to decide, you give 40% for the weightage for the customer risk, 35% weightage for the product risk, and 25% weightage for the process risk, or different formula, and then come out to the overall risk assessment process, the single number for the entire organization. Did you understand this now at this point, up to this point?
Excuse me, sir.
Yes, please.
Could you please elaborate how to evaluate risk in a sort of customer-wise? How to evaluate risk?
Okay, good
Rating.
question. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Good question. You are asking how the customer risk evaluation can happen using a few parameters, no?
Yes, sir.
Right. So customer, I'll take an example, well, 2-3 examples. School teacher coming and opening a savings account with declared source of income, salary, and then monthly salary of 50,000 rupees. And so it can be, the risk parameter can be, first of all, whether the teacher is a resident in the area under the purview of the branch. If it is a different geographical location, you can have a higher risk number, 7 or 8. But if she is living in the area under the purview of your branch, it can be 2 or 3 low risk number. That can be one parameter. Then the second parameter can be, now this customer risk profiling effort is not a one-time job. It is a periodically performed task. At the time of opening, you can very well say that customers may disclose that she gets 50,000 rupees, 50,000 rupees salary, and she is a housewife, and therefore she spends money on the transport and then probably on children some small amount, and maybe the husband is looking after the household expenditure. So again, that can parameter set on that aspect can be low risk, 2 or 3. Then what other things can you ask from the individual customer? Whether she has, whether she is living in a own
Rented house or own house?
Yes, rented her own house. That's right. So then in that case, you have to design a parameter to say that she spends money on the rent as well, payment of rent. And if she says that her husband is bearing the cost of the rent, that again cannot be a low risk number, because they are not staying on their own house. Because in the period that the husband income is lower, she may have to step in to meet the rental expenses as well. So likewise, you can design a parameter to give you a medium risk or something like that, 5 or 6, or risk scale of 1 to 10. Then after opening the account, after 3 months or 6 months, you come with the experience that she deposits money. Although her salary, she discloses 50,000 rupees, she deposits money afterwards 75,000 or 100,000 or 125,000 rupees per month. So then you have put an inquiry, then the risk number has to go up, isn't it? Because her income is more than what she disclosed. So another parameter can put you on inquiry, and then the risk number can be 7 or 8, high risk, because she had additional income. Then on your mitigation effort, you have a discussion with her, and then say that you come across, you reveal that she has started a private tuition class to other students, and then she levies a fee. Private tuition, she earns fee income of at least 75,000 rupees a month. Now, what happens if you did not do this? She, of course, very well bought the money into your bank or finance company and deposited it, so that you are aware that she had additional income. But if she had taken that money to any other institution and deposited, meaning you won't know at all, isn't it? So yes, therefore, you have the opportunity of attracting new business as well, provided they are legitimate business. Now, private tuition is not a banned activity, isn't it? It's not illegal. So therefore, it is very well legal activity, and then she is entitled to do it. And the risk aspect, of course, can be little higher, because now she originally did not disclose that she does private tuition. Of course, she may have started on the go as time progresses. But later on again, once again, you find that her monthly deposits have gone up to about 200,000 a month. To see, again, risk evaluation has to go up. Then your inquiries reveal that she has started a school transport as well. To transport school, she bought a van or something like that, vehicle, and then she's transporting school children to school and from school when she is going to the school and coming back. And she earns a hiring charge, transport charge. So likewise, as long as the activity is legal, economic activity is legal, you can carry on with it, and then you can adjust your risk numbers like that. But once you learn that if the activity is illegal, then you can have a discussion with her, then see that how to discourage her or stop her doing that. Failing which, of course, you have to go for STR. You know the process STR, I did not describe again. So this is how the customer risk evaluation happens. Now, it is quite different when it comes to a joint account and partnership, and then company account, and various other business type accounts. And also self-employed people also can have various other types of income. So it is a matter of your understanding of the customer and the customer base and your particular geographical areas, activity of your particular geographical areas. All right, you got it?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So similarly, product also you must design the parameters like that. Okay. Any other question, please?
Sir, could you please tell what is EDD?
Enhanced due diligence. I think I have good explanation on that on the assignment document. Have you got the assignment document in front of you, or have you got it downloaded?
No, sir.
Please download your assignment. Are you doing the assignment or not?
Today only I joined the class. I didn't get the connection for the last couple of weeks, sir.
Why is that? You are a new recruit, is it?
No. I have been following the course for the last couple of months. Unfortunately, there was no signal or some other reason. Due to some other reason, I couldn't follow.
So how are you going to meet the deadline of 30th for the assignment? Only 3 days more, isn't it?
I'll try my level best, sir.
Yeah, please try and do that. And
Yes,
if there is any significant challenge in meeting the deadline, please discuss with the IBSL how to manage that, right?
Okay, sir.
All right. Any other comment on this? Because understanding at this point in time is very important. Risk-based approach.
Sir, what's the ideal frequency for risk evaluation of customers?
Sorry?
What's the ideal frequency for risk evaluation of customers?
That depends on each and every financial institution. Of course, large institutions like DOC, People's Bank, Commercial Bank, HNB might do it on every quarter basis because of the large volumes to handle. But the volumes, if you are employing a software system, the volume doesn't matter. But in that case, you have to categorize the customer groups effectively to the respective groups and then employ the parameters relevant to them, risk evaluation parameters. But a small institution like finance companies could do it, I think, on a monthly basis or so, because they would have less customer base. And then also they also have the luxury of segregating the customer groups and then risk evaluating them on a different group basis. All right?
Thank you, sir.
Because more frequent the risk evaluation happens, it is beneficial for the management of your business activities. And your senior management and the board of directors can be given most updated set of risk assessment figures on a frequent basis. So they are able to manage the business very effectively. Okay.
Okay, sir.
Any other question, please? Is Sachit online, joined online? Sachit Innoda? No? Mr. Sachit Gunasekara, is he online? Now, up to now, I have described the overall process, and for the balance slides, I can go a little bit deeper into the concepts. I want to know about your understanding. I'm sure you would have read through the 2016 Gazette notification and then 2018 guidelines on CDD and then risk evaluation. I think I did not answer the question on EDD, right? Enhanced due diligence. Enhanced due diligence is that now know your customer data recording is a mandatory thing for each and every customer. And then to due diligence, enhanced version of KYC, maybe particularly to reach out to the customer specific business transactions when the business transaction of the customer is enhanced. So that's called customer due diligence. Then extremely high risk customer groups perform way too high risk activities. So therefore, to know more details of those type of customers, enhanced due diligence customer data has to be obtained and recorded. They give a bigger threat to the financial organization in one way, and the other way around, for you to be able to generate more income to commensurate with the high risk that you manage, the additional information is very vital. Now, in the school teacher example that I just took, 50,000 rupee monthly salary earning school teacher is a low risk customer, and then just KYC data recording would be adequate. But when we learn that she has started a private tuition, and then subsequently when she has started school transport, that is giving little more risk than the low risk category, medium risk or high risk category. So because she has become more enterprising, entrepreneurial abilities, so therefore customer due diligence data has to be recorded, has to see whether she is renting a premises to conduct the classes, or she is doing it at a residence, and then also how did she obtain the vehicle to transport school children, the source of income, then how does she charge the transport fees, the mode of collection of the transport fees, whether the total income is coming to the account maintained at your institution or she partly deposits it at a different institution, all that customer due diligence. Then she might also be able to sometimes start up a grocery business with the help of family members, grocery business. So in that case, she become a little more riskier, and then income level would have gone up further, because the turnover from the grocery shop also can be deposited into the account maintained with your institution, or can go to a different institution. So enhanced due diligence, meaning finding out all those data, and any one of them are far from being a social friendly activity, then you have to engage with the proper dialogue to find out more details. And then if you really suspect of any collecting of pyramid scheme money or any other terrorist financing money or something like that, then STR has to be lodged straight away with in a confidential manner. However, all these things has to be really managed and then recorded properly. So this KYC, CDD, EDD data has to be recorded properly, and then the recording has to be kept for 6 years minimum from the date of closure of the account. Or if there is an inquiry, it has to remain, the records have to remain until the inquiry is over. So this is the example for the EDD, CDD, and then KYC. All right. So if there is no other question, shall we adjourn for a break and come back at 11? All right.
Okay, sir.
Okay. Are there any questions on the matter that we covered so far on the risk-based approach?
Excuse me, sir.
Yes.
Sometimes certain individuals don't divulge their true position. In that circumstances, how to get the correct information when we are evaluating customer due diligence?
Yeah. Thank you very much for that question. Yeah, Mr. Chandima Atukorala, right?
Yes, sir.
Right. Thank you very much for the question. Now, the bankers are supposed to be at least of average intelligence, right? So therefore, but you're not expected to play the role of a detective.
Yes, sir.
So therefore, to show that you have, you are not being negligent in evaluating a certain customer relationship, you should have designed your customer account opening application or mandate form in a manner that a customer is compelled to answer the dedicated questions. And on top of that, any behavior, significant behavioral change in a customer, like in the example that we just discussed a while ago, school teacher coming and opening a savings account with a salary and subsequently detecting that she is giving private tuition and then also running a school transport and all that. She may have not divulged everything at once as soon as she planned to do it or before beginning to do such ventures. Now, similarly, you find some doctors also doing private practice, isn't it? So therefore, if you can demonstrate to the best of your ability that you have taken maximum precautions with regard to the customer transaction that the customers give you through the account relationships, and then also their loan account relationships, and in front of law enforcement agency like police or CID or the court of law, if your financial institution and yourself can demonstrate that you have taken adequate precautions and your understanding was about the customer relationship and the customers, who the customer is, by way of documentary evidence, if you are unable to obtain documentary evidence from a customer, that doesn't matter, but you as an executive of the financial organization, you should be able to produce a report or a small comment in the customer file that you observe this and you feel that the customer is giving private tuition or doing private practice or whatever, and the additional income generated is commensurate with the turnover that they generate out of that, for example. I think that is adequate. That's what I meant by banker being of at least average intelligence. The law does not expect the banker to perform the role of a detective. So therefore, if and when the matter requires, the circumstances require that for you to prove yourself in front of a judge or in front of a police officer that your duty was this and then you have done the duty with utmost care, and these are the evidences, that's the value in maintaining a proper record. So there are pluses and minuses. What are the pluses? If you can be very active with the customer relationship and negotiating and then employing all the skills of detecting or finding the customer transactions, you should be able to gather the customer turnover, deposits and then loan, other transaction turnover, especially import-export customers. And then you can attract more business transactions. But as long as you being lethargic or you don't follow up the customer, then you tend to lose because your competitors can be more smart than you. So therefore, business-wise, you should be able to evaluate the customer relationship all the time and winning the customer's transaction as much as possible. because there are a lot of banks and finance companies in operation in Sri Lanka, particularly in your market, there's a lot of competition. Unfortunately, we do not have much of international clientele because of the closed nature of our economy. But imagine if you are employed in an organization in Singapore or Hong Kong or London or New York or Tokyo, you are exposed to many, many international forces and volumes. So unless you become more attractive and more agile, you will not have much of business volumes and then to prosper in your position and as well as your contribution to your organization, the company. So please don't worry about customers not giving your relationship matters with them. You must be giving him confidence that you are the banker for that customer, and then you have to express your euphoria that you are always there to protect the customer, unless he does with illegal activities. So therefore, you should be able to get most of the information, and then the interaction, regular interaction with the customer, only through that only you have to find out more signs, symptoms, signals of new business. The customers are also human beings. They may not, at the time, they may not be able to share most of his or her dealings all the time. And probably the banker-customer relationship and the knowledge that you possess, used in the customer's point of view, you will be also be able to join the customer and then suggest a lot of things and then get the customer involved, where the customer will be very happy and appreciative. So saying that you have been helpful in developing his or her business. So I suggest don't worry about customers not being able to give you much of the business activity, information about the business activity that he or she does. As long as your relationship is positive, they will give you the information whenever they need facilities and other transactions. But at the same time, you should be able to compose or convert your relationship into a very positive manner so that the customer gives you information firsthand and then as a priority before he or she gives the information to any of your other competitors. Okay, Chandeva?
Yes, sir, I understood. Thank you.
Welcome. So any other questions, please? Any other questions on the risk-based approach? So we came up to this slide. That is a basic introduction of the overall risk-based approach. Because again, let me summarize the introduction. I take great pain in explaining this because I know most of you are not been exposed to this aspect as yet. And the fact that some of the financial institutions have been penalized, penalty imposed for not having implemented these mechanisms. And in particular, the usefulness of this risk-based approach in managing your business ventures. So basically, risk-based approach is a mechanism that you should employ in your organization to evaluate the customer base on risk-wise, giving a risk number numerically, and your product base and processes and functional and then other transaction mode base. So as I told you all this while in the morning, that if you employ a risk scale, common risk scale for all these things, finally you can come up to overall risk assessment of your organization or finance company or a bank using a weighted average effect of the customer risk profiling, product risk profiling, or process risk profiling. So let me ask you again, if you practice a different risk profiling method in your organization, please share with us so that everybody benefits. But however, only a few banks and finance companies are able to use this mechanism so far. Therefore, we continue. On the risk scale and category, page number 12 of this 2018 guideline on risk, money laundering and terrorist finance and risk management issued in 2018, page number 12 gives you these risk categories. As I told you, low, medium, high, and extremely high risk categories. Empirical studies, I told you, discussed with you this morning, that there are about 80% of customers belonging to, roughly about 80% or 75-80% of customers belonging to low risk category. They are unlikely to happen and or have minor or negligible consequences risk-wise. Unlikely to happen any major risks. Unlikely to, the wordings used in the guideline itself, I'm using the same wordings. And the response is to mitigate risk further so that overall you have a lower risk number. Simplified CDD and other requirements apply. That's the response for low risk category customers. Then the next category is about 10 to 15% of medium risk customers. Remember the school teacher who opened the savings account with a 50,000 monthly salary, low risk. But however, when she embarked on private tuition and then school transport, she became medium risk. So possible this could happen and or have moderate consequences. Response, mitigate risk again. Normal customer due diligence and other requirements apply. That should be the response from the financial organization. Then next category is high risk. About 5 to 10% of high risk customers usually empirically finance companies or banks have as intermediaries. Risk likely to happen because they are high risk category, risk likely to happen and or to have serious consequences. Response, do not allow transaction establishment of customer relationships until risk reduced through risk mitigation, such as enhanced due diligence. So the response from your organization towards high risk customers should be try and mitigate the risk, employ meaningful mechanisms to mitigation of risk. At the same time, perform enhanced due diligence, additional due diligence on the customer's activities, and keep an eye. Then about 2 to 3% of extremely high risk customers, mainly politically exposed guys or bureaucrats, who tend to lay their hands on unethical practices, bribe taking, extortion, and so on and so forth. Risk almost certain to happen and or to have very serious consequences on the financial institution, including its financial standing and reputation. So it is meaningful and it is more or less compulsory to have a very frequent and then monitoring mechanism on extremely high risk customer, each and every one of them, because risk almost certain to happen and have a very serious consequences on the financial institution, including its financial standing and reputation. So the response: do not allow transaction to occur or customer relationship to be established or reduce the risk to acceptable level through risk mitigation, such as enhanced due diligence. Most of the international organizations, financial organizations, large banks, multinational banks, this extremely high risk category of customers, onboarding as well as continuing the relationship is with the approval of the senior most management committees, because they need to evaluate the extremely high risk undertaken by the institution, and they are required to measure the return that they earn as income, whether they cover the undertaken risk. If the return or earnings are not over and above the risk undertaken, it is meaningless and pointless taking the high risk of reputation and the financial standing of your organization. These 4 categories, requirement of 4 categories, is stipulated on the Financial Intelligence Unit Guideline number 1 of 2018, page 12. I know some of the organizations have only 3. The extremely high risk category had not been introduced so far. But if you are not introduced it so far, please take meaningful action to be in line with these guidelines by introducing extremely high risk category as well. So we go through again each quadrant or each model of the risk-based approach. First, customer assessment process or CRAP should be covering customer identification through KYC, CDD, EDD, etc. Then the business intelligence risk. The school teacher, the tendency or probability of her doing private tuition and then engaging in school transport. Those are business intelligence. So for which, as an average intelligent person employed in the banking and financial sector, you should be able to gather information as long as you are interactive with your relationship with the particular customer. to gather such business intelligence, you don't need to allocate high resources. Matter of emails, SMSs, WhatsApp messages, or a couple of meetings, personal meetings would be adequate, which is your day-to-day job. So one might ask, how do we monitor all such customer relationships with a particular branch or with a particular bank? But that is why the branches are segregated into various banks are segregated into various branches, and then there are business heads, executives, and employing frontline staff, including marketing staff. So it's a matter of organizing your affairs at a particular branch location or as a whole in a bank. Then transaction type risk. Then after engaging the customers as a whole on the business intelligence, then particular transaction types that the customer engages in can be evaluated, and the transaction type risk can be ascertained. Then transaction trend risk, where the customer is prone to high risk or customers prone to low risk, risk-averse customers, high-risk customers, entrepreneurial customers, and the customer's intention will be able to gather, and then transaction trend can be extrapolated with that findings. So designing of customer parameters, customer risk evaluation parameters has to be concentrating on these four or any other risk aspect that you would anticipate. The customer risk model, customer risk assessment model. The model, at the moment we use Excel-based model, mobilizing the support of your IT to do slight changes. This would give us the following. The parameter set has to be agreed with the business heads, marketing heads, and operational guys, along with the risk personnel. And then first of all, you identify the inherent risk. And when you identify the inherent risk, you employ the mitigation aspect to contain the risk that you identified. So inherent risk can be given a number in this particular model. Then the mitigation aspect that you employed also can be given a number. And then when you subtract the mitigation number from the inherent risk, you arrive at the residual risk, which cannot be passed on. The residual risk is the risk that your organization is going to bear up with the customer. And your duty is to see that you generate commensurate income or adequate income from this particular customer, which should be over and above the risk number. Should be covering the risk that you undertake with the customer. The residual risk which cannot be passed on, but the company has to manage and seek commensurate return. So as we discussed in the morning, identify the risk, measuring the risk, then evaluating the risk, then managing the risk, and finally, if the residual risk number cannot be further divested or shared with anybody else, and still the earnings or the income is not adequate to meet the or cover the residual risk, then you employ a de-risking strategy, including termination of the customer relationship or further negotiation with the customer. Customer might be able to bring in and give you more profitable business to cover the additional risk angles that you manage or and on behalf of the customer. Any question on this model? I would like to know if and when, if you are employing a risk-based approach model in your organization, does it cover this or does it cover additional features? Can you please share if anyone has handled customer risk-based approach? Okay. So next model, product risk assessment process. Again, product identification. Whatever the product that you have designed and then have been used to attract customers, the particular product identification, the risk of that particular product, and risk involving the attraction to the customer, whether it can be remodeled, remodified, or another features, product features can be enhanced to give more benefits to the customer so that the customers get attracted to it. Bearing in mind the cost of funds and cost of the product, because the products become more profitable to the financial institution when there are more customers subscribing that or using that product. To attract such high numbers of customers using this particular product, first of all, the employees in the front office side and marketing division should be able to explain the features of the product in a convincing manner. You cannot utter bullshit or you cannot utter facts which are not in existence and then attract customers and finally ending up with complaints and litigations because customers have been lost their expectations. They expected some level of benefits or utility for their financial understanding and then expectation. Finally, after having engaged with the product, if they cannot reap the benefits or they do not feel that they are being served that the manner that was originally proposed, then there can be a lot of complaints. There can be a lot of other costs involved in handling such complaints and finally facing the number of complaints and associated complaint resolutions, ending up the financial ombudsman or the regulator, or finally in the court of law. So the product identification has to be meticulously handled, and the product awareness has to be shared with the customers by the respective employees, and the training and the HR divisions as well as compliance responsibilities that each and every employee who deals with the product marketing and the front office and also the back office are made aware of such product features and the general expectation of the customer of the financial institution out of the product. Then associated with that, business intelligence risk. Business intelligence meaning that those particular products in a financial organization, intermediate organization, there are tens of sometimes hundreds of products that are offered to the general public or clientele, and the business volumes of each and every product, and whether they bring in low-cost funds or high-cost funds to the organization, and whether they bring in high margins or low margins, and whether they pose any other liquidity threat, and so forth. That is a business intelligence risk. Then transaction type risks, whether the high volume transactions or low volume transactions. Then transaction trend risk, the transactions of this particular product, whether you expect them to increase or decrease as time goes by. And finally, as part of business intelligence risk, the contribution to the bottom line of the organization, finance company or the bank, this particular product, whether they contribute to the bottom line. They add margins with each new customer or not. Transaction trend risk also is associated with that angle, because it may not be a prudent venture to keep such products on offer shelf if such products does not bring in adequate margins to the bank's bottom line or finance company's P&L. How does these products bring in contribution to the bottom line? If it's a deposit or liability product, the low-cost funds base, and whether the asset base or the products offered on the asset side, whether they could be financing those asset products in a manner that gives a spread to the margin to the P&L of the organization. So the risk evaluating parameters numbering about 5 or 7 or 8 or 10 or 12 or 15 can be designed to evaluate or assess the product risk covering these aspects. And then they can be scaled from 1 to 10. I still maintain that 1 to 10 because we may have to be on a common scale or customer risk, product risk, and then processes or delivery channels, models, so that we are able to really amalgamate all of them and then bringing in one single risk number for the organization. So product risk assessment as a model should be able to mobilize the support of your IT to do the slight changes. This would give us the following. Again, the inherent risk number of the product, not the customer. There's a slight change here. Risk number of the product, impact of risk mitigant adapted. If there is a risk identified, usually operations or the promoter of the product would design a mitigating mechanism, and that impact of that with a number, risk number. Then inherent risk minus impact of mitigant risk. You arrive at the residual risk, which cannot be passed on, but the company has to manage and seek commensurate return. So the product risk assessment model, again, through parameters designed, whatever the parameters number, and again 1 to 10 risk scale, ending up with a residual risk number. Out of those, all those parameters, whatever the individual risk number can be aggregated or totaled up and brought in the product risk assessment number for each product that you handle. I just wanted to find whether I can share with you some of the products, features that we could design for each product type. So one of the main products that finance companies and banks offer is gold loans, isn't it? Gold loans. As an example, or pawning or gold loans. As an example, I can just share with you. If anyone wants, they can write down as well. The parameters that could be designed to measure the or assess the risk of gold loan product, gold loan or pawning product. One of the parameters is that availability of NIC or other government recognized identity by the prospective customer who walks in with gold jewelry to pawn or obtain a gold loan, whether the customer has an identity. If the customer has identity, minimal risk, 1 or 2. If the customer does not bring in identity and then you are struggling to establish the identity of the customer, then the risk numbers goes up. If missing identity and customer promises that he or she will bring it and produce it in due course, then the risk numbers can go out to 7, 8 or 9 out of 10. Then proof of address. Proof of address, even though the NIC has a address given, the address proof may not be with a utility bill or something like that. If the address proof is not available, again 1 to 10 risk number, you can design the risk weightage. When there is no proof, higher risk, and when there is proof available, low risk. Then positive answers to questions on ownership title to the article or jewelry article. You would discuss with the customer who are the owners of the articles, because there have been a lot of fake articles that have been pawned or brought in as security for gold loans. Positive answers to questions on ownership or title of the jewelry article. Then test results to identify fake items or articles. Test result. Usually pawning or gold loan centers have mechanisms, tests to identify the fake articles, isn't it? There are many jewelry items with a gold plating, plated gold, and inside there can be some other metal, so that they can be termed as fake articles. So test results, again, a deciding factor, and then can be high risk if the test results fail, or if the test results are not performed at any office. Then frequency of obtaining gold loans by a particular customer. Frequency of obtaining gold loans by any particular customer, you can judge by the number of times, by the name or the NIC number or the address. Frequency of obtaining gold loans by the customer. So, which can pose a threat to your financial institution will be, a higher risk will be a very frequent customer who would definitely be financial indiscipline, and then the probability of paying the interest component or the capital component back with a reasonable time gap is probably doubtful. Then time duration taken to settle previous loans if existing customer. Time duration taken to settle previous loans if existing customer. If the time duration have been large enough to categorize them as high risk on the scale 1 to 10, Then non-settlement of previous loans if existing customer. Non-settlement of previous gold loans if existing customer. Then loan to value ratio, that of course decided by the financial organization. Loan to value ratio, you know what it is. Value of gold, market value of gold, and amount of finance or advance you give the customer. As a product evaluator, loan to value ratio is a material risk number, because to keep with the competition, most of the institutions raise the loan to value ratio so that the customers are attracted to such organizations. Right? Loan to value ratio. Then strong room facilities to safe keep. Such pawned articles, jewelry items has to be safe kept for the duration of the gold loan. The facilities of strong room available to safe keep such articles is another risk number, another risk parameter. Then insurances availability for pawned articles. Insurances available for the jewelry items for the duration of the pawning articles. Then also auctioning process, when the articles are to be auctioned, when they are not redeemed or not, the gold loan is not paid up, and then articles, jewelry are not removed from the premises or the financial institution, there is a process of auctioning. That auctioning process, whether they are practical, cumbersome, how frequent, and whether it's troublesome, you can, if necessary, break it up into 2-3 parameters, all right, but still risk numbers can be allotted. Then most of the organizations conduct such auctioning of pawned articles or jewelry in one location, collected from several branches. So, or else sometimes the pawned articles of jewelry are transported to a main office for safekeeping or strong room facilities. So in such an event, transporting gold articles with security and insurance is another process. So those can be, I read about 13 parameters, and there can be many other parameters also can be designed. So therefore, the parameters suitable to your organization can be selected and agreed upon with the senior management and decided and used. So I just gave you an example of parameters for a product of gold loan. There again, an inherent risk number can be obtained, and any of mitigating factors employed, such as strong room facilities and verification of NICs and verification addresses, and so on and so forth, which are mitigating factors. Another number can be given, and the inherent risk number minus the mitigating risk number can give you the residual risk number out of each parameter. And then as a gold loan product, with all those parameters aggregated together, will be giving you a particular risk number for the entire product of gold loans. So such measures can be employed to all the products that are offered by your organization to the public. And if you think that the profitability or the contribution to the bottom line of your organization should be measured, then parameters can be also designed to ensure that adequate recovery rate and adequate interest rates are charged on the bringing in adequate margins to the organization can be designed as a parameter so that the bottom line to that extent is strengthened, or business volumes can be enhanced in another aspect as a parameter. So the third model, process risk assessment process. Process identification, I discussed with you in the morning example of such processes. Account opening application form processing, letters of credit application processing, letters of guarantee application processing, loan application processing, personal loans, temporary overdrafts or permanent overdrafts, business loans, application processing, security documentation processing, then leasing application processing, leasing repossession process, then loan recovery processes, crib reporting processes. There are so many processes that are being used. And now present days, after the COVID pandemic, online customer onboarding process, eKYC, vKYC, gathering and storing process can also be processes, and also swift message processing, SWIFT message processing, credit card issuance process. All those can be identified, and then the business intelligence risk out of that can be also identified. Then transaction type risk and transaction trend risk also can be identified on these processes. These include business continuity planning process and other operational aspects, processing of inward payments, processing outward payments, establishing special deposit account process. There are so many processes that need your focus, but the processes that are significant to your organization must be chosen. Then again, the risk parameters has to be designed in each and every process. The risk parameters also could number up to about 10 or 15 per organization. And the risk number can be given from 1 to 10 in a risk scale. 10 is the highest risk, 1 is the lowest risk. And finally, the risk number for each parameter could be identified: inherent, mitigant risks, and the residual risk. An aggregate of that can be brought in as a process risk assessment number. So the process assessment number, again, this word has to be it's a process. The risk of process. Please correct that in your PowerPoint presentation. So mobilizing the support of your IT to do the slight changes, this would give us the following: inherent risk of the process with various parameters, then impact of risk mitigant aspect with a risk number, then inherent risk minus mitigant number, residual risk, which cannot be passed on, but the company has to manage and seek commensurate return. So similar to the customer risk, product risk, and process risk, particularly the processes, when you risk evaluate, you would be enlightened of cost savings which you could achieve through process re-engineering. And then so much so the cost can be reduced. One of the examples I can relate to you, practical examples, that one of the organizations that I was working, that particular organization was processing up to about 5,000 or more SWIFT messages per day. And each and every SWIFT message those days was printed on a computer sheet. And for printing, there were about 7 to 10 printers used with 3-ply paper. And it was costing so much to print them on a daily basis, more than 5,000 printouts a day of each message. Additionally, it was costing the organization to sort them out, bundle them on a day basis, and store them on a record rooms for about 6 months. And then after 6 months, continuously for those records more than 6 months old, has to be transported to a separate archiving place, which is rented out in the suburbs of Colombo. And all those places has also been maintained with intensive labor use. because the months and years has to be labeled, and pest control and fire hazard mitigation also has to be adopted in those premises. And for all this, the reason was that in some instances, some of the records were needed to answer the queries of process transactions. So we discussed with the managing director and then adapted the mechanism. Stop printing of the Swift messages. Instead, you record them, you write them on CDs, writable CDs. The CD could accommodate little more than 1 month's Swift messages in one CD, because for a month there are about 20 or 22 days, working days. 5,000 into that number, 20 or 22, is a big number. And then depending on the length of the message, sometimes one CD could exceed the capacity of 1 month. So somewhere or other we got together and started writing the CDs and labeling them. The CD, 1 month CD can be stored easily. Then the 5,000 prints a day into 20 or 22 working days printouts being stored or archived. This is in addition to the Swift system being able to retrieve messages on a given back date. If supposing the Swift machine is unable to produce the historical data, only these CDs were used. So thereby, we were able to stop the costing of money spent on the paper printout, the cartridge ink, and the printers being used, about 7 to 10 printers being used on a daily basis, maintenance of printers, plus the safekeeping or archiving places of the bundles of printed material in rented houses or rented stores, and the labor spent on labeling them and maintaining such premises. See the more cost saving? So those can be mitigants. Cost saving. So the process re-engineering happens in practical terms like that. So finally, that particular institution saved millions of cost per month, and now they archive everything either on CDs or in any other electronic means. So see the benefits of undertaking such evaluation, risk evaluation, business process re-engineering. So finally, the risk numbers of customer risk model, risk numbers of product risk model, risk numbers of process risk model can be brought into overall risk assessment process, or ORAP, overall risk assessment process. And this number can be displayed as a common risk number to the whole organization. In the implementation of the risk-based approach in your organization, if you need amalgamated or on a weighted average basis brought into the overall risk assessment process. When I say on a weighted average basis, as I explained to you in the morning, you can allocate a weight for all these three categories of risk. Customer risk, I said in the morning, about 40%. If you think 30% as well, okay, depending on your organization's thinking process, but that cannot vary from 1 year to next year. It has to be continuing, the decision has to be continuing, unless of course there is a compulsory change required. Then product risk, another 30 or 35%. Process risk, another 25 or 20%. If it should consist of 100%. And then finally, this under that particular weight, risk number into that weight in each model can be brought into the overall risk assessment process model. Overall risk assessment process model and can be amalgamated. And in the overall risk assessment process model, should be also be undertaking a review of threat scenarios, likelihood of occurrence of threat, assessing magnitude of damage in the event of threat actually occurring, and loss to the bank or financial institution. Business operations can be a function of customers and their transactions, transaction channel, location of transaction, etc. So you must be mindful of this factor. And then overall risk number can be played or can be shared with your senior management, corporate management, business committees, and the board subcommittees for their comments and decisions. Mind you, these three models and the overall risk assessment number can be a dashboard reflection on each and every senior officer's computer terminal menu as a report, as a critical report on a daily basis or weekly basis or monthly basis. And then if required, they could ask the compliance or the department or the office who compose this risk-based approach numbers for detailed risk numbers on customer groups or individual customer, product or product groups, or process group, and then relevant decision taken with a proper information and understanding. So in the regular requirements of risk-based approach, or RBA, is to prepare the risk assessment model to your organization as required by the Gazette notification of 1951/13, dated 27 January 2016, and of course, rule number 1, 2016 under section, and then FIO guidelines of on money laundering and terrorist financing management number 1 of 2018. This is the regular requirement. And what I just shared with you is the model that I have developed. But if you have any other model developed and could be more comprehensive or more practical, but the model that I described can be as practical as a simple Excel-based spreadsheet model. So what does the risk numbers give you? The risk numbers give you the inherent risk, the value of risk mitigating aspects, and the residual risk numbers of each customer group, product group, and processes, which give you basically the numbers segregated into extremely high risk, or medium risk, or low risk. So the focus should be mandatorily on the extremely high risk and high risk categories, and decisions taken on them on a regular basis. And the 2018 rule number 1 requires the risk assessment or the likelihood assessment of those risk numbers as well. Basically, what we generally speak in our common language or speaking language as heat maps. Heat maps. Have you heard of heat maps? The likelihood of occurrence on one axis, and the other axis carries the risk aspects. High risk, medium risk, extremely high risk, medium risk, and low risk. And the likelihood of happening on the other axis. So heat maps, the most frequent happening, and then the most highest risk is at one extreme in red color. Then as the risk lowers and the frequency lowers, yellow colors, and the bottom low frequency and then the low risk, green color. So those pictorial reporting also helps the senior management and the corporate management and the board of directors to have an idea of by just a glance of the report. So risk assessment and likelihood assessment, having identified the threats involved, financial institutions need to assess and measure money laundering and terrorist financing risk in terms of the likelihood, chance of the risk event occurring, and the impact, the amount of loss or damage if the risk event occurs. The risk associated with an event is a combination of the likelihood that the event will occur and the seriousness of the damage it may do. This is the likelihood assessment. So the 2018 rule number 1 require you to perform this aspect as well. So your software system or the Excel-based program can be extended to producing the heat maps or the likelihood assessment as well. The likelihood scale refers to the potential of an money laundering and terrorist financing risk occurring in the business for the particular risk being assessed. 3 levels of likelihood of money laundering terrorist financing risk are shown below, but financial institutions can have as many scales as are necessary for their circumstances. very likely, almost certainly it will happen. Likely, high probability. Unlikely, low probability, but not impossible. Likelihood scale. In other words, on the heat map, one axis. Based on the likelihood and impact scale, financial institutions should assess an overall risk score. The risk rating may be used to aid decision making and help in deciding what action to take in view of the overall risk. A suggested risk rating derivation can be seen in the risk metrics in the annexure given on the rule annexure given to the 2018 rule number 1. You can refer to the annexure 1 on the 2018 rule number 1 or the guidelines issued by the FIU. However, institutions are encouraged to adapt their own approach to assessing, identifying, and quantifying the money laundering and terrorist financing risk. Irrespective of the methodology adopted, the FIU requires institutions to develop a framework and implement practices to effectively identify, measure, monitor, control, and mitigate money laundering terrorist financing risk as required by the financial FTRA and CDD rules. So these are the exact particular wordings given in the FIU guidelines, rule number 1 of 2018 as well. Again, I reproduce the next axis of the heat map. Extremely high risk, medium risk, and then low risk. Extremely high risk and the high risk categories are, although there can be low in number in the categories compared to medium to low risk, there can be big number, but they would bring in adequate returns as well as routine type of transaction could happen, but still the customer due diligence aspect has to be looked into, the usual customer due diligence. But in the case of high risk and extremely high risk, enhanced due diligence has to be performed, and the transaction has to be understood on a better vision, better mechanism or better way, because they bring in high risk. Not only high risk, they bring in most likely they would also bring in high returns. But as you know, there are difficult customers who would try to throttle high-risk transactions, high-risk activities to your organization. At the same time, can be high demanding, giving only a slight or small margins, which may not be adequate to cover the risk that you want to take. So the risk management principles of identifying risk, measuring risk, and then managing risk has to be employed, and that process can be a consortium decision by the compliance, risk, operations, and then also facts presentation to the senior management or the corporate management or the board of directors for their decision. And final result could, in worst case scenario, ending up with de-risking processes. Or the positive decisions could be further negotiations and enhancing business volumes by mitigating risk as well as enhancing return. So the heat maps, one axis is high risk, extreme high risk, medium risk, low risk. And the other axis is, as we discussed before, likelihood of occurrence, as we discussed before. So designing the impact scale. The rule number 1 of 2018 also gives these guidelines to designing the impact scale. And impact refers to the seriousness of damage and impact also refers to the seriousness of damage. Yes. One participant is texting me saying that so we take details of STR reported region-wise identity high-risk regions. That's a good thinking. STRs reported from the branch network as well as branches and regions are also taken into consideration as a risk measure. Number of details of STRs or number of STRs reported region-wise. Thank you very much for that response. Thank you very much for the response. So that can be another parameter. The details of STR reported, and then those STRs details would carry whether it's a customer-related risk, a product-related risk, or a process-related risk. So an impact refers to the seriousness of the damage that is likely to be caused if the money laundering and terrorist financing occurs. And in assessing the possible impact on consequences, the assessment should be made from a range of viewpoints relevant to the business. The impact of money laundering, terrorist financing occurring could depend on the individual financial institution and its business circumstances, be rated or looked at from the point of view of how it may affect the business in terms of financial loss relating to the market perceptions. Also reporting, they also do have a digital assessment, separate assessment for digital products. Separate assessment for digital products also is also another good thing. Now, especially on the COVID pandemic, digital products is fast becoming popular and more practical, so that they are used more effectively and more profitability. The cost saving digital products are less costly to implement and also to be used, because customers also will not have to be traveling, bus fare, train fare, petrol, diesel expenses can be saved, time can be saved, and efficiently handled to execute their financial transactions. Thank you for that as well. For example, loss of investor confidence and reputation or through fines or other sanctions, such as loss, suspension of business licenses imposed by the regulator. Then the risk that the particular transaction may be seen to contribute to the activities of a terrorist or terrorist organization. The risk that a particular transaction may result in funds being used for any unlawful activity as defined in Section 33 of FTRA. How it may affect the reputation of the financial institution if it is found to have aided, investigated, prosecuted, or otherwise implicated in an illegal act, which may lead to loss of important commercial relationships, such as correspondent accounts, or being shunned by the community of customers or shareholder investors. So these are the factors that you could take into account in designing your parameters and then designing your impact scale. Again, these are the exact wording given in the rule number 1 2018 by the FIU. So I'm sure they would have also given the set of parameters to be used in each and every customer relationship, each and every product, each and every process or transaction model. But for varying institutions, those aspects change. So therefore, they would have been not able to design dedicated parameters or compulsory parameters as such. But using these guidelines, designing the impact scale and the parameters, you can very well construct your parameters and the impact scale. Three major impact levels, 3 levels of impact, 3 levels of impact of an unlawful interest finance risk to financial institutions are major, moderate, and minor. FIU encourages financial institutions to develop their own money laundering and terrorist financing risk processes and assessment for dealing with certain customers undertaking transactions in the way that best suits their business model and activities. Again, what I said earlier, each and every finance company or each and every licensed commercial bank, licensed specialist bank has to choose depending on their business model and activities and the risk appetite statement. Because the compliance cannot be varying for each and every institution. Level of compliance has to be equal, more or less equal in every organization, of course, depending on the complexity of the organization. However, the designing of parameters and impact level has to be common. Then major significant consequences that inflict substantial damage, possibly resulting in the closure of closure of the financial institution, cessation of business activities, regulatory sanctions being imposed, or financial reputation damage being experienced by the financial institution, which will have a significant impact on the business activities. That's major. Then the moderate impact involving substantial damage to the business and its reputation. Then minor or negligible consequences or effect upon the financial institution. So this is the impact, 3 levels of impact: major, moderate, and minor. Then the risk mitigation. Risk mitigation aspects also is spoken on the page 13 of the 2018 rule number 1. Setting transaction limits for high risk products or delivery channels. can be one mitigant. Setting transaction limits for high-risk products or delivery channels. Then having a management approval process for higher risk customers, products, services, or delivery channels can be another risk mitigant. Then risk rating customers and applying different requirements for higher or low risk customers, including applying different identification and verification methods and enhance customer due diligence requirements can be another risk mitigating aspect. Then not accepting customers who wish to transact with a high risk country or customers that are considered to be high risk based on the institution's board approved customer acceptance policy can be another risk mitigation criteria. Risk management strategies develop and implement money laundering and terrorist financing risk management objectives at the board and senior management level of the financial institution, and monitoring progress of implementation of objectives. Then implement clearly defined management responsibilities and accountabilities regarding money laundering and terrorist financing risk management. Then provide adequate staff resources to undertake functions associated with money laundering and terrorist financing risk management. Introduce staff reporting lines for the money laundering and terrorist financing risk management system level to the board or senior management level with direct access to the board members or senior managers responsible for overseeing the system. I think we spoke about this last Sunday as well, where the duty of the compliance department or the compliance officer is also to have a reporting back system, efficient reporting back system, I think mostly used by email method, but large institutions have their internal communication systems where through their core banking systems, the communicating module, where whenever they are suspicious of a transaction, they could escalate with minimal effort and very efficiently and very quickly without losing any time, so that the compliance department of the senior management could investigate into them quickly and taking appropriate action. Another aspect is that whistleblower aspect, which is indicated in the customer charter directive, because there can be executives, managers, senior managers, and other senior staff also involved in or conniving with certain customers. And if anyone comes across such practice, a common moderate thinking person have the opportunity to report such aspects to the senior managers or members of the board directly through whistleblower mechanism. So for all those, there should be efficient ways of communicating directly with those responsible officers. So they are part of risk management strategies. Then implement procedural controls relevant to particular services and products. Procedural controls relating to services and products, customers and delivery channels, and have been identified as being vulnerable to money laundering and terrorist financing. documenting to all money laundering and terrorist financing risk management policies and ensuring that these are kept up to date and reviewed regularly, reflecting both the scope and nature of the institutions and the findings of risk assessment conducted by authorities' activities. Such policies should also identify processes relating to non-compliance, including reporting of suspicious transactions to the FIU. Reporting STRs to the FIU, of course, are organized in one similar manner because of the fact that each and every financial organization should have one outlet to communicate with the external bodies or especially the regulator, usually it's the compliance officer. However, if the compliance officer also conniving with such suspicious activity, then there should be a mechanism for any other responsible officer to also to report such STR, naming compliance officer as also one of the culprits to the FIU, and before that to the management and the board. So there should be reporting mechanisms established to that extent. Provide appropriate training programs for staff to develop expertise in the identification of money laundering and terrorist financing risks across the financial institutions, including reporting of suspicious transactions. Develop an effective information management system which produce detailed and accurate financial, operational, and compliance data relevant to money laundering and terrorist financing risk management. These are the exact wording appeared in that rule number 1 of 2018. So you can also download and read through that. So in the model that I have developed, Excel-based model, we do have those heat maps possible at each level, at the customer risk assessment level heat map, at the product risk assessment level heat map, and the process risk assessment level heat maps, and finally overall risk assessment process heat maps as well. So conceptually, it is a simple solution using likelihood of scale or occurrence plus the gravity of risk that is identified. So as said before, very likely and extreme high risk will pose the highest threat, as well as likely and high risk or medium risk would pose a medium risk, and unlikely on the likelihood scale, the low risk category will pose the low risk or the heat map in a green color. So you would imagine the usefulness of such risk-based assessment and reporting, again, to the individual organization, individual head of business unit, Imagine that an individual head of business unit has a categorization of extremely high-risk customers, high-risk customers, and medium-risk customers, and low-risk customers in his portfolio. Similarly, products in his portfolio and processes in his portfolio. And then he's managing day-to-day time is made so much easy when he is given on a dashboard number of extremely high risk and number of high risk customers, products, and processes for him to look at. I think he could manage his job within 10 to 15 minutes a day if this type of categorization and sorting out and the risk evaluation with a simple number is produced. And he will have more time to study and implement his or her strategies to negotiate with business customers and executives so that the targets could be met very effectively. So, and similarly, heads of business, and then again, only a risk number could be shared with or informed to the senior management and the corporate management, and still a dashboard showing off to the board of directors of the risk numbers. They would call for, if required, detailed reports and then study the risk angles further and take decisions on extremely high risk and high risk customers, products, and processes, finally helping the institution to manage their affairs on a timely manner and with time-saving techniques. They could take decisions, far-reaching decisions, and they could be looking at new business to bring in revenue to the organization. Further, there can be such reports sent to the regulator, non-bank supervision, FIU, foreign exchange departments or DOD or IOD departments as relevant. They could be also looking at the aspects, risk, extremely high risk aspects, and supporting the respective finance company or the licensed commercial bank or licensed specialized bank to manage their business affairs on a responsible manner and a prudent manner so that they could reap more benefits. And the regulator also could take decisions to increase the financial inclusion. What is financial inclusion? Spreading the banking services to the unbanked areas, to incorporate unbanked customers, those customers who do not have savings account, current account, or loan account, or any other transaction with a bank, can be also encouraged to obtain services from a finance company or a bank in their work, day-to-day work, economic activity and prosper. So that financial inclusion paves the way for economic development. So how can you use this risk-based approach in your assignment of regulatory aspects of KYC, CDD, EDD, and merely the regulator, the FIU, and the bank supervision and non-bank supervision is making you possibility of giving numerical numbers to the risk that you undertake of KYC, CDD, and EDD, and enabling you to manage your business with time-saving techniques so that the additional time could be used for your business promotions and reviewing of your customers' products and processes. And these risk numbers, comparison between different customer groups, different customers, different product groups, different products, and different processes. A comparison can give, numerical comparison can give you an idea of best utility and best achieving results, ending up with greater profitability with consciousness towards cost saving. So naturally, not only the KYC, CDD, EDD, the risk-based approach, giving the flair of numerical values to the risk of KYC, CDD, EDD will help the respective institutions with ease of managing and optimum results without falling into pitfalls and avoiding penalties and increasing the reputational stage. The reputation of your organization can be improved so that it is possible for you to attract more customers, attract more business, thereby contribute to the economy positively, and the economic development of the country, economy also taken into the next stage, next level. Finally, if all the individuals and organizations in the financial community understands and then employs the correct methodologies, overcoming the introvertness of the economic activities of our country can be extended to the neighboring countries and the regions and the world at large, so that the economy will prosper with new business, regional business, and the world business flowing through our institutions, finance companies, licensed commercial bank, licensed specialized banks. So with that, we are come to the end of the presentation as well of risk-based approach. I think I was able to convince you of the importance of the risk-based approach being used in your particular organizations. They are very well used in a higher scale in the multinational organizations, large banks in the world, around the world, because these have come, risk-based approach has come as a recommendation from the FATF and the regional bodies like Asia Pacific Group of Money Laundering, and being implemented by the FIU and the Bank Supervision and Non-Bank Supervision Department of Central Bank of Sri Lanka. So you have 3 more days to submit your assignment. Please try and take a few things from this risk-based approach also, which are relevant to the regulations of KYC, CDD, DDD, and the need for compliance. Definitely, since it is a direction from the FIU and the Bank Supervision and Bank Supervision, it is a part of regulation and each and every organization must comply with it. But the compliance should be with understanding of usefulness and understanding how it could aid the management of the organization for better. So with that, let me invite any more questions from anyone.
Sir,
Yes, please.
it is a news that Prevention of Terrorism Act is to be repealed or amended in the near future. In such circumstances, what could be the impact of future of the terrorist financing guidelines issued for the banking sector?
Sorry, can you repeat that again, my dear, please?
It is a news
Yes.
that Prevention of Terrorism Act is to be repealed or amended in the near future by the Parliament.
Right.
In such circumstances, what would be the impact of the future of the terrorist financing guidelines issued?
Right. Now, let me take an approach like this. Prevention of Terrorism Act is a dedicated Parliament Act brought in by the Sri Lankan Parliament, mainly to combat terrorism, which prevailed for more than 25 or 30 years in Sri Lanka. And then the Sri Lankan government was able to defeat the terrorism in one angle using the provisions of PTA. But to combat financing of terrorism, there is a separate piece of legislation or Parliament Act, the name of Convention of Suppression of Financing of Terrorism Act number 25 of 2005. That has the provisions to combat financing of terrorism, which is mainly dealt with through the intermediary financial organizations. And then, as I discussed with you the other day, the finance companies and banks in Sri Lanka, through their compliance officers and the FIU and law enforcement agencies, did a fantastic job in raising thousands of STRs and then stalling all terrorist financing through the organized banking channels. So therefore, the problem here is, the issues are that what is not spoken is that such positive contributions by the Sri Lankan banking sector is not highlighted. And at the same time, the financing particularly, and also prevention of terrorism in Sri Lanka, as known in international world, I don't think we should step on the politics anyway. But for my answer to your question, what the international community does not understand is that the unique local flair of the terrorism in this country. Because Prevention of Terrorism Act only helped Sri Lanka achieve the meaningful act of defeating the LTTE in the year 2009, coupled with the Combating of Financing of Terrorism Parliament Act also. But however, for anything in a country, there's opposition. The opposition guys cry foul and then try to showcase the bad side of it only to the rest of the world. And Sri Lanka being a small country in the world and a developing nation in the world has to be listening to and has to be at the mercy of the world powerful organizations and the nations to manage the internal affairs. So these conflicting scenarios internally is the problem at the moment, in my personal opinion. But however, repealing of PTA could be managed by the government as well, because those so-called hidden agendas of the opposition politicians should be managed, understood and managed properly, because they are thinking of the opposition guys
Vote
are
base.
thinking of not only vote base, they are trying to, yes, definitely to increase the vote base, but at the same time, they are thinking of achieving their own goals, the desired agendas at a difficult time, which the general population cannot understand, they cannot think of. Because the simple question a sensible person could ask is that, what were the contributions made by so-called opposition guys who cry foul that PTA should be banned with, and also what have they done so far? Their pedigree, their character must be analyzed, and their intention must be analyzed. So whether they think of the betterment or benevolence of the common man, whatever the ethnic group they belong to, because at this point in time, not only at this point, for any country and anybody should be forgetting their ethnicity and then thinking as Sri Lankans, isn't it?
Yes, sir.
So therefore, this is a complicated issue, camouflaged definitely by the political agendas of few individuals. So therefore, I don't think the repealing of PTA would make any positive contribution to the community now in the present status of affairs, because terrorism has been beaten, have been defeated. But however, the instances like the April 2019 attack, bomb blast, has to be, such occurrences may happen in the future as well. So if And when the government want to repeal the PTA, they should be in a position to look after and look after the community and then prevent such occurrences in the future.
Will not happen again.
Yeah, they should not happen again, isn't it? So the government, whichever is in power, should be able to handle without the PTA such events. So the question mark, it's up to the legal authorities to analyze and see whether just the Convention of Suppression of Financing or Terrorism Act would, and the penal code or whatever the criminal legislation is adequate to cater to such events. And thank you for bringing in politics into the...
No, I don't want to discuss politics here, sir. I quite agree with you, the comments made. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you. So any other question on the risk-based approach or the assignment?
So I have a question on KYC and CDD.
Yes.
Yeah, that is under customer acceptance policy of a bank. Can a bank reject opening an account for a customer based on specific information that we have on that particular customer? Let me clarify. Now, suppose the person who comes to open an account is living within your locality and you are well aware that this person is involved in illegal activities, right? So in that case, and we know for certain that this person's income is not generated through legal means. So whatever the proceed that is coming into the account is going to be illegally earned proceed. So in that case,
Right.
can we open an account for such customer? That is, he has not been convicted by a court. Maybe he was arrested a couple of times and released later on. That is the first case. And again, if say there was a famous case by a famous tuition master who defrauded substantial billions of rupees of public funds, right? So
Yes.
now he has been convicted and he's released. Now he's living in a lawful life. So in
Yes.
that case, if some a person like him comes to open an account, what is the approach that a bank should take? That is number two. And the other one is, if a person who is convicted by a court and later on, let's say, released through a presidential pardon or something, but we know for certain that this person was convicted due to some crime. If such a person comes to open an account, what is the approach that the bank should take? And if we are to reject, what is the reason that we should give to that customer?
Right. Now, thank you for the question. 3 questions, right, altogether?
Yeah.
Okay, very enlightening. Thank you very much, and very practical. Now, let me make a statement here. Now, anybody seeking the services of a financial institution is a human right. Depriving of such human right also can lead to some sort of litigation against that financial institution if not handled in a proper manner. Now, in the first question you asked whether a known character in the area for illegal activities, for whatever the reason, he had been able to survive or get himself released out of the jail, out of the remand prison custody for various influences and maybe for various technical details of the law applicable. So when he approaches you for banking services or financial services, first of all, you should, I would not encourage you to reject such relationship. What you should be doing is that entertaining the customer, but rank him on the high risk, extremely high risk, which will give a warning sign to the entire staff cadre in your organization, as soon as the customer account is opened on the screen, the extremely high risk flag will appear, and then they will take more precautions. And everybody, all the staff should be made aware to watch for the signals of illegal activities and high risk activities, and then how to deal with such customers, and then also to initiate STRs if they are permitted, if they are warranted, if they are required to do so, and enable reporting STRs through the compliance and the senior management, so to the FIU, so that FIU can deal with, can bring the such illegal activity of economic earnings, which are supposed to be channeled through your financial organization, to they can bring, the FIU will refer them to the respective or relevant law enforcement agency, whether it is CID or any other excise department or narcotics or bribery and corruption or whatever the law enforcement agency, and deal with such instances. So you as a financial professional, without getting into the trap of declining basic human claim of financial services, you process at the same time, as soon as you detect a suspicious illegal activity, you process a STR and enable the relevant law enforcement agency to handle such, investigate such or inquire into such activity, and enable them to prosecute, enable them to impose the relevant penalty or impose a jail sentence through the courts. May take time, but however, you go through that process. I think that answer is valid for this question 2 and 3 as well, isn't it?
Yes, I agree. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Thank you.
basic thing to remember is that even Mr. Prabhakaran or Mr. Bin Laden comes and asks you to open an account, you must go through the process, but simultaneously go through the reporting process as well. So that would really give you impetus to not only attract business, because rejecting business arbitrarily for the fear of repercussions alone, because as you quite rightly said, some people with presidential pardon, some criminals with presidential pardons coming into society as normal human beings, if they are really rehabilitated, they should not be rejected from the society, isn't it? They should also have a normal life, because the rejection from the society alone can make individual criminals. So that angle must be covered or stopped. Any rehabilitated person should have an opportunity to converge with the normal society, especially the banking community, financial services community, and obtain services. All right?
Okay, thank you, Sid. Thank you for the explanation.
Any other questions?
So in that instance,
Yes.
if that particular customer performs a significant transaction,
Yes.
are we allowed to perform, like for withdrawals, are we allowed to withdraw the funds?
Yes, if the account is not frozen, if the account is frozen by the FIU, FIU have the right to freeze the account by over the telephone call, right?
Yes.
And if the account is not frozen and the party has the legal title to the ownership of funds and the balances of the account, I think you should go ahead with the transaction.
So don't the FIU penalize later if they found that something went wrong? So don't this FIU won't penalize the institution?
How can they penalize when there is no freezing order to stop utilizing the positive balances belonging to, if he is the beneficial owner of the funds, if he has the legal right, unless FIU issues a freezing order, or unless you have neglected his criminality of his earnings through a KYC, CDD, EDD, reporting STRs should be the precaution. And unless that happens, there is no way that the FIU can penalize you. Because the FIU can penalize you only if you have done a wrong, right? The wrong can be only violating a freezing order or neglecting a criminal activity through KYC, CDD, and EDD. So for average intelligent bank, financial professional, if you are believed to be, if you have information that the funds lying in that account or through the legal right of that particular individual, he is using in a proper manner, and if you can prove it in the court of law, then I don't think FIU or anybody else in the government, even not even the court of law, can find fault with you. But your ability to prove your innocency or your rightful KYC, CDD, and EDD assessment should be able to be documentarily provable through records. On the other hand, what I feel is that if you deprive such individual use of his legally owning funds, then you can be liable for litigation by that particular individual for not allowing him to use his own funds legally owned by him. So he can sue you, right? If you do not allow use of such funds where the beneficial owner is himself, legal right he has, all the legal rights he have to use the funds. If you do not allow, then there's a problematic. I have a practical example here. Somewhere in the 2007-8 years, I was the chief compliance officer of a large bank, and one of the so-called forceful ministers, because there was an account under freezing order. The account holder was in Mana, and the account was opened in the Mana branch of the bank, and the account was frozen by the orders of the FIU. And this particular powerful minister had found out my name and the number from somewhere, I don't know, being the compliance officer. He telephoned me first and identified himself, and then said, I wanted to know about the freezing order. He explained. Of course, I cannot divulge more confidential things to a third party. So with that limitation, I answered to best of my ability. But this guy was repeating the call every day for about 2 weeks. So then I told my secretary, if and when you get this call again, please tell that I'm not in a position, or I'm at a meeting, or so that I evaded the calls over the balance period of time. But I was able to, whenever I answered the call, I was able to explain to this powerful minister that they are the people who passed this law in the parliament by way of FTRA or Prevention of Terrorism Act and all that. And then he cannot come and tell me to overcome or to uplift a freezing order issued by the FIU. Unless they come through the FIU, I said I cannot deviate. So he understood and he stopped calling me after about 2 weeks' time. So if I tell him more details, he will guess who it is. So I better not speak more. You got
Thank
it?
you, sir. Yeah, thank you, sir.
So if there are no other questions, can we wind up? Because we have taken time overrun by 15 minutes. Most of the people may be hungry. All right. So then I would appeal again. Please complete your assignments and submit them on the due date. If you have any difficulty, liaise with the assistant director at the Institute of Bankers and then discuss with your problem. But unless otherwise, please submit your assignment in time, because it's an email submission, isn't it? So as far as on my part, I have responded to all your email questions and telephone questions on the assignment. And I think I have not missed any one of you. So if you have further queries, please, I'm open again. I can respond to your emails or telephone calls at the same time. And then if this status of non-restriction for movement exists for next week, most probably Mr. Rupasinghe might be able to take a class on the next Sunday. But if not, if Ms. Rupasinghe cannot take a class, then I will take again on Monday. We'll meet up on Monday in that case. But otherwise, I will wish you good luck, each and every one of you who had inquired through emails and telephone calls. Thank you very much. At the same time, I wish good luck to each and every one of you. Thank you.